Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's guest is Nick Park, co founder and creative director at AP Keaton, a creative company he helped grow from a small partnership into a 50 plus person team. Over the past 15 years, he's worked at the intersection of creativity, strategy, and operations, building the systems, structures, and decision making frameworks that help creative teams stay aligned as projects become more complex. Rather than simply focusing on the ideas themselves, his work is centered on creating the conditions that allow great creative work to happen consistently. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, one thing that stood out to me is that you rarely describe your job as coming up with ideas. Instead, you talk about creating the conditions where good ideas can actually emerge. That feels like a very different definition of creativity. How did you arrive at that way of thinking?
Yeah, not to let myself off the hook, right? I'm still responsible for being creative, but
Yeah.
um, I kind of came into marketing sideways, I guess. I never planned to work in marketing, so I think I have maybe less attachment to some of the specialties that most creative directors enter that role with.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Absolutely.
I was in fine arts and then found myself in marketing and uh, had a lot to learn from designers, copywriters, and everybody else that I worked with. So I quickly found that my job felt like it would be the most valuable that it could be to enable all of these people who are specialists to do their best work. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a really compelling way to frame it and to see it. And reading through your experience, I got the sense that a lot of your work is really about reducing noise. In creative organizations, everyone is adding ideas, opinions, possibilities. I'm curious, how do you know when a team needs more exploration and when it actually needs more clarity?
Well, I suppose I'd like to back up because I think that all that clarity and all that context comes from just setting the stage. And I'm a big proponent of systems thinking. I feel kind of the most energized at work when I'm looking at the agency, at individuals' workflows and how they're working together, and I'm
Okay.
kind of assessing that as like the starting place. So I can give you an example about that. When we started AP Keaton, which was a little over 10 years ago now, this was the second creative director role that I had, but I was
Okay.
launching the agency, which was great. It gave me a little bit more freedom and ability to shape things.
Yeah.
And we were running the agency as a very small team at first, and so there was not a lot of systems needed, or it was a lot of individuals working together. But as we grew and we were acquiring other agencies, experiential agencies, digital agencies, everybody came in and they had their own specialties, and we were doing a lot of cross training. We were trying to get people who came from a digital background to work on experiential. We were really trying to make a cohesive thing happen, and it was a lot of work, and people were not very comfortable. All of a sudden being a total generalist and knowing how to talk about everything. So we divided up into divisions so that there were certain lanes for
Interesting.
different types of work. And then within those, we had pods. So there was a creative, a production specialist, somebody who was on logistics, account management, everybody that would be needed for a team within those divisions. And that worked great for a very long time. But then the situation changed again, and the market shrank quite a bit, especially
Yeah.
in adult bev, which is what 90% of our clients are in. And so as our agency got smaller, it didn't make sense anymore to have so many different divisions and silos.
Okay.
It became more difficult, actually, under those circumstances, to fit the right people with the right projects, and for some people to not be, you'd have one designer who's overloaded and another designer who's kind of light, and they don't know how to jump over into the other
Yeah.
people's workflow. So we changed again at that point. And instead of having everybody kind of assigned to a client or assigned to a work type, we went back to more of a Kanban system with tickets, and people were just taking the next things, and people needed to then generalize a little bit more than before. So it's like we set up the agency twice in entirely different ways, just because the business was operating under different circumstances. And I want to circle back to your original question, which is how do people know what they need to know and have that ability to operate. But I think it comes down to having their role defined, whether they need to be knowledgeable about all of the different work streams or just more specialized. The core structure is like the starting point for that.
Yeah, that really resonates. And you mentioned that in critiques, you try to offer multiple viable paths forward instead of searching for the right answer. That feels increasingly rare in a world that's obsessed with certainty. I'm curious, what have you learned about leading creative people without making them feel like there's only one correct solution?
So let me tell you about. We just made a new hire
Okay.
a few months ago. My experiential design lead, who had been with me for 7 years, went off to other pastures, and in that transition, after 7 years of being in his role, he had a lot of his own ways of doing things, which
Yeah.
I'm always trying to allow people to be the author of how they're working, whether it's their personal management, their communication style. If it's working, they have more context on that than I do. But as I was looking through the way that he had been working, I recognized that our asset management, our proofing process, there were a number of things that we could do a lot better. So prior to the new guy coming in, I made drafts of tools and templates and workflows. And then when he came in, instead of just giving them to him and saying, here's what you're supposed to do, I walked him through the way that we had been doing things so that he would have context that everybody else had, and he would know what everybody else would be expecting. And then we walked through these new tools and these new ideas about how I thought things might work a little bit smoother. But I gave them to him as drafts, things to iterate on, things to push back on. I want him to know why he's doing a thing in a certain way. And if I'm putting a safety net in place where he doesn't think that he needs one, and it's going to make his life easier, or he's going to like his job more by not having that there, that's a risk that I'm willing to let him take. So I want people to own the thing that they're doing. I feel like they're more prone to liking their work and also actually doing the things that they should be doing.
Yeah. Wow, I love that story. That's a great example. I feel like you flow with intention. You flow with structure. And I think that's a very positive way of flowing. A lot of creative conversations celebrate freedom, but your career seems to suggest that structure is just as important. How have your ideas about constraints changed over the years? Do you see them less as limitations now and more as part of the creative process itself?
Yeah. The constraints are like that's the reality.
Yeah.
I think, again, going back to the way that I came into this work and embracing the challenge of marketing instead of using marketing as a way for me to do some kind of creative output or to put myself out there. For me, if it's in budget, if it's on time, if it gets the commercial results that people are looking for, that's success. It's not about
Yeah.
awards and it's not about
Yeah.
my thing. So those constraints are like they're the most important aspect of a brief, or it's the beginning of a brief to really understand all of the constraints, prioritize as needed, and uh, and then they give you the frame. You don't really want infinite possibility. You really want things to push against. You really want things that say, okay, the budget ceiling is here. We only have 7 days, so these things are out of the question. It all of a sudden helps illuminate the things that you can work with, and yeah, I think it can bring out better, more unexpected creative results. But it's also it's what the whole game is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I found interesting is that you've spent years translating executive priorities into work that dozens of different people can actually execute. Where do you think most organizations lose alignment? Like, is it in the strategy itself or in how the strategy gets communicated? What are your thoughts there?
Uh, which strategy are you? What are you thinking about specifically? Or
Like the creative strategy,
uh,
for example.
uh, it probably does come back to not having the brief aligned on before people are rolling. So often,
Yeah.
it's not until revision rounds that you discover, oh, you know what? Like we weren't aligned on some part of the
Yeah.
brief. So when new work is, or when a project, whether it's an internal or a client project comes up, we're gonna refresh our brand. We're gonna come up with a new commercial strategy, whatever it is. Everyone has to be aligned on what the problem really is or what the business context is, all those constraints that we were just talking about, any assumptions that people might have, which are very frequently not not articulated, and that's why
Yeah.
actually articulating those assumptions and sharing that with everybody who's going to be part of the work is essential. But it's also helpful to know about decisions that have occurred previously. Why if if a thing is done in a certain way because somebody needed it that way a long time ago, why is that? Is that still applicable?
Yeah.
And then all of those pieces come together to form the brief. Everybody, you know, everybody should be really aware of that brief, and then as it changes or if it changes, it needs to be accessible to everybody who's in the work. And that's how you prevent the surprises later,
Yeah.
or the you know this isn't working because maybe we made something really funny or really cool, and got enamored by something that doesn't actually
Yeah.
achieve the objectives.
Absolutely. And as your company has grown from a small partnership to more than 50 people, I'm curious what has been the hardest belief about leadership that you've had to let go of?
The hardest what?
a belief about leadership that you've had to let go of?
Huh. Um, I'm not sure. Hardest belief. Uh, my ideas of leadership have changed quite a bit, or really just my understanding of
Yeah.
it. But um, I suppose I realized that after many efforts early in my career to change the way that things were done, maybe the way that the agency operated internally, or the way
Yeah.
that mostly internal stuff. It's very difficult to affect change. It requires doing all of the steps. People don't hear of a great idea and say, "Okay, yeah, I'll do that." They require they have to be invested themselves, and
Yeah.
if they're not aware of why they're doing why they're being asked to do the next thing, or a different thing, you're not gonna actually get the buy-in, even if people are nodding and saying, yeah, they'll do it, and they may intend to. It's more difficult than I had imagined
Yeah.
to affect organizational change.
And you wrote, I was drawn to something that you wrote, that your role isn't to put your own thumbprint on everything, but to create an environment where strong work can happen. I'm curious, how do you know when you've actually built that kind of culture? I mean, what are the signs that you look for?
Well, you see decision making confidently happening. Still, things have to go through me, and I have to sign off on things. But when I see people uh, making an alternate version that made more sense to them, because they weren't just tasked with something. They have the
Yeah.
context, and uh, they know how to check all of the boxes for success. They can surprise me with something that I hadn't asked for that could be great. And I think that's like that's a moment of success.
Yeah.
When you see that the people who are designing and writing and doing all of the things that an agency does, uh, when they feel comfortable to make decisions and to lead their own piece, that's
Absolutely.
that's a great feeling.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, for being so generous with your time and your insights. You gave a lot of amazing insights on this conversation. So I'm very excited about our audience to hear this episode. So it was great having you on. Truly a pleasure to have you on. And I'm very excited about our audience to hear this conversation.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.